The smell woke me before anything else did. Not antiseptic, though that was there too, lying underneath everything like a held note. It was something harder to name. Recycled air, latex, the faint sweetness of IV glucose running into the crook of my left arm. I knew the smell the way you know a piece of music that belongs to a terrible occasion. Instantly, before your conscious mind has caught up. I had been here before. Not this exact room. The ceiling was different. Acoustic tiles in a slightly warmer cream. And in the upper right corner, there was a water stain shaped like a comma. A pause in the middle of a sentence. Not a full stop. I would think about that later. But this moment, this quality of thin light through institutional blinds, this specific pitch of the cardiac monitor set at a frequency slightly too fast for comfort. I ate this weight of my own body as something external, something I was only a tenant inside. I had inhabited this moment before, and I had not woken from it. I lay still and breathed and thought. I took stock of what I knew, the way I take stock of everything, systematically, beginning with the most reliable data and moving outward. My name is Vesper Calloway. I am 34 years old. I am a medical ethicist employed at Asheville Memorial Medical Center, where I have worked for 11 years in advanced care planning, surrogate decision-making, and the legal and ethical frameworks that govern both. I hold a graduate degree in bioethics and a secondary certification in healthcare law. I have spent my career documenting the precise conditions under which medical decision-making can be shaped, influenced, when the incentives align badly, abused. The cardiac monitor beeped. My husband, Dorian Ashwood, had been driving the car. I cataloged my physical condition without moving. The ache of cracked ribs was first. 3, possibly 4, a horizontal band of pain that tightened with each breath but remained manageable. My left leg was elevated. I could feel the specific discomfort of a fracture in traction. My head had been dressed at the left temple. When I ran my attention over it carefully, I decided the wound was superficial. The thinking was clear. The memory was intact. The memory. In another version of this hospital room, the version I had lived through without surviving, I had spent 11 days unconscious while the world arranged itself around my absence. By day 3, a Marie healthcare proxy form had been submitted by my family to the patient services office. It named my sister, Arabella Calloway, as my primary surrogate decision-maker on the basis of her nursing credentials and the confident recommendation of my husband. By day 7, Arabella had begun conversations with my attending physician about what I would have wanted. By day 9, she had reached out to the palliative care team. By day 11, she had made the call. The machine went silent at 4:47 in the morning. There had been no one in the room. I had turned that detail over many times in whatever space exists between the final silence and whatever comes next. The absence of anyone? Even a nurse doing a routine vitals check would have noticed. Even a family member, restless and guilty, would have stayed. But there had been no one. Much because by 4:47, the outcome had already been arranged and there was nothing left to witness. I opened my eyes. The ceiling confirmed it. Caldwell Regional Medical Center. The specific cream of their acoustic tiles. The ventilation hum at a low recognizable frequency. I had consulted here twice on ethics committee cases, enough to know the building's language. This was not the ICU. The room was quieter and less equipped, and the light suggested a step-down unit or a standard medical floor. I had already passed the most acute phase. The whiteboard on the wall held 3 pieces of information in blue dry erase marker. My name, the date, and my nurse's name. The date told me I had been here for 2 days. In my first time through this, I had not opened my eyes until day 4. I was ahead. 2 days. Always the standard proxy form processing time at most hospital systems was 48 to 72 hours, accounting for notarization, the required witness protocol, and administrative processing. If the form had been submitted, and I assumed it had been because I had to assume everything I knew from the first time through, it was somewhere in the system, but it might not yet have been finalized. I might still be in time. I pressed the call button. The nurse was named Hadley. She appeared within 4 minutes, which told me this was a well-staffed floor and she took call buttons seriously. She was mid-30s, competent-looking, with the economy of movement that comes from years of floor nursing. Nothing wasted, nothing performed. She ran through the orientation protocol with practiced efficiency. Date, location, my name, I use simple questions designed to assess alertness. I answered each one fully and precisely. Can you tell me the name of my attending physician? My voice was rougher than I expected. Dry, underused. Dr. Leandro Castillo. He's the hospitalist on this floor. I didn't know him personally, but I knew his training program. Solid clinical foundation, protocol adherent. The type who followed procedures exactly because he understood why they existed. Has any paperwork been submitted to patient services or the ethics office designating a surrogate decision maker for my care? The pause was brief, the kind that a patient would miss entirely. I had spent 11 years watching for exactly this pause, the one that lives between having information and deciding whether to share it. I'd need to check with the patient services coordinator, Hadley said. Oh, please do, before my family's next visit, if possible. She nodded and left. I used the time alone to continue my internal assessment. The head wound, superficial. The ribs, fractured but not displaced. The leg, the clean pain of a simple fracture rather than something more complicated. I had broken a bone in a hiking accident at 22, and I remembered the difference clearly. My cognition, intact. I tested it against the date, the location, my professional credentials, my law certification examination scores, things memorized deeply enough to function as benchmarks. I tested it against what I knew about Dorian and Arabella, running through the timeline the way I would run through an ethics case. Chronologically, factually, without embellishment. I was, legally and medically, capable of making my own decisions. That was the first fact. Everything else would follow from it. Dr. Castillo arrived 23 minutes after Hadley left. He was younger than his training program's reputation had led me to expect, early 40s, with reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead and the bearing of a physician who had trained himself to deliver uncertainty without apology. He sat in the chair beside the bed rather than standing, which I noted. It was a small choice that revealed something about how he treated patients. We ran through the orientation assessment. I answered everything cleanly. He reviewed my chart, checked my pupils, ran his hands with professional care over the rib injury. "You're doing better than we expected," he said. There was concern about intracranial pressure in the first day. Well, but it's resolved without intervention. The ribs. 3 fractured, none displaced. Left tibia hairline fracture, no surgical indication. Limited weight bearing for 4 to 6 weeks. A pause. It was a significant impact. I know. I kept my voice level. Dr. Castillo, I need to ask you 2 questions. One clinical, one administrative. And I need you to give both of them equal weight. He settled back slightly. Go ahead. Clinically, what is your current formal assessment of my decision-making capacity? He didn't look away. Based on this assessment and this conversation, I would consider you to have intact decision-making capacity. I'd like that documented formally. It's with the exact time of this assessment recorded in my chart. I can do that. Administratively, has any paperwork been submitted to this hospital designating a surrogate or medical proxy for my care? The pause this time was longer. He was not being evasive. He was being careful, which is different. He was thinking about what he was about to say. Your family submitted a healthcare proxy form yesterday, he said. It names your sister, Arabella Calloway. I had known this was coming. I had rehearsed the moment of hearing it. I had thought I was prepared. The cold of it moved through me anyway. Under what circumstances was that form accepted? I asked. At the time of submission, had a formal incapacity determination been documented in my chart? I watched him arrive at the same conclusion I had. So I need to review the admission notes, he said carefully. While you do, I want to formally invoke my right to direct my own healthcare decisions and rescind any previously submitted surrogate authority. I want that documented immediately, witnessed, and time-stamped. I want a copy of the documentation. He looked at me for a moment. You're a medical ethicist, he said. It came out quiet, almost to himself. Ashevale Memorial. He opened the laptop and began typing. The form was witnessed by Hadley, and a second nurse called in for the purpose, generated, and placed in my chart within 40 minutes. Dr. Castillo also flagged a concern in the admission notes. The proxy form had been accepted on day 2 without a documented capacity assessment. He notated it as a procedural deficiency. I asked for printed copies of everything. Hadley put them in the drawer of my bedside table, beneath the get well card Dorian had left. The card was cream-colored, his handwriting careful and even. He had always had beautiful handwriting. He was meticulous about small things. I left the card face down in the drawer. My phone had been in my jacket pocket during the accident. The screen was cracked. I kept a cracked screen protector on it for exactly this reason, a habit from years of dropping it at conferences. But when Hadley found the charger in the supply room and I plugged it in, it powered up fully. 47 unread messages. Most were standard, well wishes from colleagues, an automated gym reminder, 3 increasingly urgent messages from my mother, 2 from my brother Gideon, 1 from Dorian, sent the morning after the accident. Thinking of you. 1 from Arabella. He sent the previous afternoon. From this hospital's IP address, according to the metadata. I'm here, V, we all are. I read Arabella's message twice. I studied the grammar of it, the way she had inserted herself into the collective. The way we all are erased the particular nature of her presence here. She had been sitting in this building as my credentialed surrogate with authority over my care. While I was unconscious 2 floors above her, I composed my messages in order of urgency. First, to Josephine Mercer, my personal attorney, who had handled my individual finances and estate planning since before I married Dorian, since I was 24 and practical enough to know I needed someone watching the things I didn't have time to watch myself. I'm awake. I need you here today. I bring everything related to my estate and financial documents from the past 18 months. Second, to Osric Thane, chair of the Patient Rights and Ethics Committee at Caldwell Regional, whose published work I had cited in 3 of my own papers. I introduced myself, named my institution, explained the procedural concern with precise concision, and requested a consultation at his earliest convenience. I put the phone down and looked at the ceiling, the water stain shaped like a comma. A pause in the middle of a sentence, something coming before it and something coming after. Dorian arrived at 11. I heard his footstep in the hallway before I saw him. Deliberate, slightly heavy on the right, the sound of someone who moves through the world as though the floor has been arranged for his convenience. I had always found it reassuring. Not the certainty of it, the confidence. He came through the door looking tired in a way that was real, not performed. This was the first detail. The tiredness was genuine. People who have made a decision and feel nothing about it don't look tired. They look organized. Dorian looked like a man who had been sitting with something heavy for 2 days and hadn't found a way to put it down. He sat in the chair and looked at me. "You're awake," he said. "I am. They told me this morning. I came as soon as I could." He paused. "How are you feeling?" Like I was in a car accident. I kept my voice even. Not cold. Not yet. I wanted information first. "Tell me about the crash." He blinked. "What?" "The accident. What are the details? What road were we on?" "The Harrogate Road. The ice. I lost control on the curve." Was there a police report?" "Yes, of course. I want a copy today. Can you send it to Josephine?" He looked at me the way you look at someone who is behaving unexpectedly when you haven't yet decided what the unexpectedness means. "You just woke up." "I've been assessed as cognitively intact since 9:47 this morning," I said. "That's documented in my chart with the timestamp, if you want to confirm it with Dr. Castillo." I paused. I also formally revoked the surrogate designation. The silence that followed had mass. "Your family thought it was—" "I know what my family thought." I kept my voice even. "What I want to know is what you thought, Dorian." He looked at his hands, folded on his knees. "I thought you might not wake up," he said finally. "Oh, I thought someone with medical background needed to be available to speak for you." "And Arabella was your recommendation?" Silence. "She has a nursing license," he said, "which she hasn't practiced on in 3 years. I watched his face. "But that wasn't the reason, was it?" He stood up. "You need to rest." "Dorian?" I waited until he turned back. "I'd like copies of everything you've signed in connection with our joint financial accounts in the past 18 months. I'll have Josephine request them formally if you prefer, but I'm asking you directly first." The look that crossed his face was very brief and very specific. The look of a man who has been moving carefully through a plan for months, and has arrived at a moment where the plan is no longer functioning the way it was designed to. "I'll call her," he said. "Ah, good." He left without touching me. He had not reached for my hand. I had not offered it. The room felt different after he was gone, lighter and colder at the same time, the way a space feels when something heavy has been removed from it. I had loved Dorian once. I want to be honest with myself about that, because dishonesty in private is the most expensive kind. I had loved him with the particular attention I gave to everything I valued, methodically, without excess, consistently. I had reorganized my mornings around him for 4 years. I had revised my estate documents when we married to include him in my primary beneficiary designations, because that was what you did when you believed you were building a shared life, when trust felt like a reasonable investment rather than a risk. And I understood now that we had been building different things. He had been building an exit, and I had been signing the paperwork for it, one document at a time, during the months when I was too distracted and too trusting to read what I was signing carefully. Josephine arrived at 2 in the afternoon. She had the leather document case I had seen her carry for 15 years, and an expression that told me she had been worried long before my message came through. "I've been trying to reach you for 3 weeks, she said, settling into the chair with the calm of a woman who had spent decades delivering unwelcome news in small rooms. "I know, I was distracted. I didn't apologize for it. Tell me what you found." "Before the accident, well before, I had a concern about a transfer of assets that came through in the fall. You signed a consent form in October, moving your 30% stake in the Asheville Wellness Clinic into a jointly held LLC. She opened the case and produced a file folder that had clearly been organized in anticipation of exactly this conversation. The LLC names you and Dorian as co-owners, but the operating agreement has a survivorship clause. I already knew what came next. I said it quietly. "If I die, his share absorbs mine." "Yes." She let the words sit in the room. "There are 3 other documents with similar structures. 2 real estate transfers, including the Harbor condominium, and a consolidation of your individual brokerage holdings into a joint account. In each case, the joint structure you signed incorporates the same survivorship mechanism. 4 documents, 8 months. A methodical and a patient restructuring of the financial boundary between my assets and Dorian's anticipated inheritance." "Were any of these flagged to you at the time?" "I wasn't your attorney of record on any of them. Dorian used Pendleton and Associates." "Yes." I knew Pendleton. Aggressive, precise, known for financial structuring that was legally airtight and ethically questionable. "What else?" She reached back into the folder. "This is preliminary, but I believe there are additional documents, a will amendment, and possibly a deed transfer related to the Edgemont parcel, the land you hold jointly with your parents." I absorbed this. "I need you to find everything," I said. "Every document, every amendment, every instrument related to my estate executed in the past 18 months. I need to know exactly what I signed, under what conditions, and whether independent counsel was present for any of it." "I'm already pulling records," she said. "End of week." "I may not have end of week." She looked at me carefully. "What exactly are you telling me?" I told her about the Proxy form, about the procedural deficiency, and the revocation already in my chart, about the continuing education module, the advanced care planning certification Arabella had completed 3 months before the accident. 3 months of preparation. Josephine was quiet for a long time after I finished. "The relationship," she said carefully, "between your husband and your sister. How long?" "I don't have documentation of the beginning," I said. "That's one of the things I need." She nodded once and opened a new section of the folder. "Arabella's nursing licensure is current," she said. She also, interestingly, had completed a continuing education module on advanced care planning 3 months ago. "I know." I paused. "Can you help me request the visitor logs for this hospital for the past 48 hours? I want to know how often she's been here and whether she's had any documented conversations with clinical staff." "Under your rights as a competent patient, you're entitled to access your own care records, including any documented surrogate consultations." "Start with that." Josephine stepped into the hallway to make calls. I spent the interval on the phone with my brother. Gideon answered on the second ring. His voice had the specific texture of relief that also contains, underneath it, Guilt. The guilt of someone who has participated in something without fully understanding what they were participating in. Vesper? A long exhale. Oh, you're awake. God, you're awake. Tell me about the dinner, I said. The night of the accident. Walk me through it. We were worried, he said. You weren't waking up, and Dorian said someone needed to be ready to make decisions, and Arabella said she'd already looked into what the process involved. Arabella said she'd looked into it, before the dinner. A pause in which I could hear him rearranging the memory. Yes, he said slowly. She already knew how to file the forms. And who suggested her name first? Dorian or Arabella? Another rearrangement. Longer this time. Dorian mentioned her first, he said. He said she was the only one with clinical training. Arabella said she was willing to take it on. She said she was prepared. He stopped. I didn't think about that word at the time. I know you didn't. I kept my voice gentle. Gideon, I need you to do something tonight before you speak to anyone else about this, including Arabella. I need you to write down everything you remember about that dinner. Who was there? What was said? In the order it was said, every detail you can recall. Write it down before the memory is influenced by anything else. Vesper, what's happening? I can't give you the full picture yet. I will when I can. I promise. A pause. Will you do that? Of course. He stopped. Of course I will. After I hung up, I sat in the near dark of the room, a monitor glow, a thin line of light under the door, the city outside doing its indifferent winter work, and thought about my brother. He was 37, careful and kind. In what he moved through the world trusting that the systems around him were operating in good faith. He had trusted the system. He had trusted Dorian, who was calm and organized, and had seemed appropriately grief-stricken. And he had trusted Arabella because she was his wife's younger sister, and because she had a nursing license, and because when someone hands you a form and tells you it's what needs to happen, and you are frightened and exhausted, and the woman you love like a sister is unconscious 2 floors above you, you sign it. I thought about what it was going to cost Gideon to understand what had actually happened. I allowed that cost to register. Then I picked up the phone and continued. The visitor logs came through patient services by end of day. Arabella had been at Caldwell Regional 4 times in the 48 hours of my admission. Each visit had lasted between 40 minutes and 2 hours. On the 3rd visit, the clinical notes showed she had met with the covering physician, the doctor managing my care in Dr. Castillo's absence that afternoon, and been documented as patient's designated healthcare surrogate. The covering physician had given her an honest and complete account of my injuries, my recovery timeline, and the variables that could affect my outcome. It was the information you give to the person you believe is authorized to receive it. Arabella had asked one question, which the physician had noted verbatim. What is the threshold for considering comfort-focused care over continued intervention? Day 3. Not quite 3 full days after the accident. As I read that notation and sat with what it meant in the specific language I had spent my career learning. Comfort-focused care is a legitimate clinical category. It is also, when invoked by a surrogate who has already determined a desired outcome, the procedural mechanism by which a machine can be turned off. I noted the notation, dated and timed, and added it to the folder. Arabella arrived the following morning. She brought 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for herself. The gesture so automatic, so perfectly calibrated to the language of sisterhood, that it almost bypassed me. She was wearing navy, and her dark hair was pulled back, and her face was arranged in careful concern. She was 29. She had our mother's bone structure and a quality of composed stillness that most people found reassuring. It was a learned skill, but that stillness. I had watched her develop it over years, and I knew the difference between stillness that was earned and stillness that was constructed. Hers had seams. You look so much better, she said, setting my coffee on the table. Better even than yesterday. Thank you. Sit down. She sat. She assessed the room as she did. The whiteboard, the documents folder on the table, the closed bedside drawer, with the scan of someone who was looking for something specific and trying not to look like they were. How are you feeling? Sore? I said. Tell me about the proxy form. She didn't visibly react. This was her specific gift. the absence of reaction where one should exist. Dorian thought it made sense for someone with clinical experience to be available, she said. Oh, given the circumstances. Did you suggest it, or did he? A fraction of a beat. It came up naturally. He told Gideon it was discussed at dinner the night of the accident. Gideon says you already knew how to file the forms when the subject came up. Something very small shifted in her face. It was there, and then it wasn't. Everything happened very fast, she said. I don't remember the exact sequence. Of course. I lifted the coffee with my right hand and held it without drinking. Have you spoken with any members of the clinical staff about my prognosis or my care plan? I asked about your progress. I was listed as your surrogate. You were listed on a form accepted without a documented capacity assessment, I said. I revoked that designation yesterday morning. You'd be able to see the revocation in my chart if you tried to access it. I paused. I'd advise against trying to access it now that you're no longer my authorized representative. She held very still. I'm your sister, she said. Yes, and I'm yours. Which is why I'm telling you directly rather than letting the administrative process reach you on its own timeline. I set the coffee down. I know about the continuing education module, the advanced care planning certification you completed in October. The stillness became something else. Lots of nurses. 3 months before I was in a car accident with my husband, I said. 8 months after he began transferring my individual assets into jointly held structures that benefit him in the event of my death. I kept my voice flat and factual. I'm not making an accusation in this room. I'm telling you what I know in sequence, so that you understand the scope of it. She stood up. You're reading things into a very difficult... I'm an ethicist, I said. Reading the documentary record is my entire professional training, and the record is detailed. I met her eyes. Sit down. She didn't sit, but she didn't leave. There was a moment in the silence between us, the specific moment when a person finishes deciding what to say and realizes there's nothing to say. And then she said, "What do you want?" The question beneath every performance, the question that told me she had moved past the front of it. I want you to understand the position you're in, I said. I woke up ahead of schedule. The proxy form has a procedural defect that's already formally documented. My capacity has been timestamped and witnessed and placed in my chart in a way that predates any further attempt to invoke surrogate authority. I looked at her. Everything that was built around my incapacity is already dismantled. I wasn't going to hurt you, she said. I looked at her for a long moment. I know you believe that, I said. She left without finishing her coffee. I noted the time of her departure in my phone and added it to the log. Osric Thane arrived 11 minutes later, which meant he and Arabella had passed each other in the hallway. He was compact and precise, late 60s, with a gray beard and the particular alertness of someone who had spent decades in rooms where the stakes were high and the documentation was everything. "Vesper Calloway," he said. "I've cited you 3 times. I know. Oh, I cited you twice." We looked at each other with the recognition of people who have spent their careers in the same narrow field. "Your message was admirably understated," he said. I try. I paused. "I'll be direct. I want your committee to formally review the procedural handling of my surrogate designation in the first 48 hours of my admission. I also want a committee note in my chart confirming the procedural deficiency and establishing my current autonomous decision-making status. I've already pulled the file. Your attending flagged it. I asked him to. There's no documented capacity assessment before the proxy form was accepted." He looked at me over his glasses. "This is a significant gap. I've built my career on exactly this kind of gap." I shifted against the pillows, managing the ribs. "Because I also want copies of all documented communications between the surrogate and my clinical team during the 2 days I was designated incapacitated." "We can provide that." He paused. "Are you considering a formal complaint?" "Not yet. The complaint, when it comes, will be more comprehensive than a procedural error in hospital administration. I want the full picture first." He understood. He was a man who had spent a career building full pictures. "One more thing," I said. "I'd like a patient advocate assigned to my case for the remainder of my stay. Someone who flags any unusual access requests to my chart. I'll arrange it today. He left. I thought about the conversation and found nothing I would have changed. Day 4 brought 3 pieces of information. The first came from Josephine at 7 in the morning. Almost there were not 4 documents. There were 6. The additional 2 were a will amendment signed in September at Pendleton's offices and a property deed transfer embedded as an addendum to a real estate closing for an unrelated property. In the September will amendment, my primary beneficiary designations had been restructured to increase Dorian's share of my professional estate by 30%. The language was subtle. A person reviewing their own will at a routine appointment, distracted, trusting the source, under time pressure, might well have signed it without fully absorbing what had changed. I had been in the middle of the Ashevale Hospital Board controversy in September. I had been preparing testimony for a public hearing. I had been signing things Dorian put in front of me, the way you sign things you trust the source of. Without the independent review, I would have applied to a stranger's documents. 6 documents, 8 months. The patience required to construct a plan of this kind was a particular kind of intelligence. Not impulsive, not emotional, not the action of someone operating from desperation. This was built by someone who could hold a desired outcome clearly in mind for months while performing normalcy in every surrounding interaction. Dorian and I had cooked dinner together during those 8 months. We had taken a trip to the coast in the spring. We had argued mildly about a scheduling conflict and resolved it the way married couples resolve small disagreements. All of it a surface. The second piece of information came from Hadley. In the careful tone she used when sharing things, she felt professionally obligated to share. Arabella had called patient services the previous evening and asked about the process for invoking surrogate authority in cases where a patient's capacity was in question. She had been told there was no mechanism for reinstatement without a formal court determination. "Please note that call in my chart," I said, the inquiry and the verbatim response. Hadley did. The third piece came from Patricia, the patient advocate Osric Thane had assigned, who called at 11 to report that someone identifying herself as my surrogate had attempted to access my electronic chart through the family portal that morning, using login credentials provisionally issued when the proxy designation was active. Amos, the access attempt had been automatically blocked by the system, which had flagged the revocation. Patricia documented it. I added it to the folder. Arabella had tried 3 things in 24 hours: a direct visit, a patient services inquiry, a system access attempt, each one blocked, each one now in the record. I thought about what it meant to watch someone exhaust their options in real time. There was nothing satisfying about it. It was simply information, each piece adding precision to the picture. Day 5. Dorian returned in the evening. He was dressed more carefully than his last visit, and his expression had been arranged into something that might have read as concern to someone who hadn't spent 4 years cataloging the difference between his performed and genuine states. "I spoke with my attorney," he said. "Hey, I assumed you had." The documents were legally executed. Everything was properly witnessed, notarized, consistent with applicable law. "Legal execution and informed consent are different standards," I said. "And you know that, or you would have had me review them with an independent attorney. You trusted me with the financials." "I did. I won't again." He crossed his arms. "This is grief," he said. "This is a traumatic event, and you're—" "Tell me about September," I said. He stopped. "The Pendleton appointment, when I came in for what I believed was a routine estate review. I was there for 12 minutes with a 23-page document." I held his eyes. "Tell me what you had me sign." The look that crossed his face was brief and informative. He had not expected me to know about the reception log. He had not expected me to have moved this quickly or to have known exactly where to look. "Josephine?" he said. "She works for me," I said. "She always has." He stood. "I'm going to advise you," he said, with the careful formality of someone shifting registers to buy time, "that anything you're planning to file is going to be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately—" "I'm not interested in your assessment of the cost," I said. "I'm building an accurate record of what happened. That's something I'm very good at." He walked out. I sat in the quiet room and allowed myself exactly what I was feeling. Not grief, Not anger, but the specific weight of having been completely wrong about something I had built my adult life around. 4 years of a marriage, the daily texture of a shared life, the feeling of being known by someone. Well, I had not been known. I had been managed. After a minute that I called Margaret. She was a forensic accountant I had worked with on a healthcare fraud case 2 years prior, and she had a particular gift, almost architectural in its precision, for identifying the seams in financial documentation. The places where something had been constructed to look one way while functioning another. I described what Josephine had found without framing it as anything other than a document review. Margaret asked 4 questions, wrote down the answers, and told me she would begin that evening. Then I called the detective whose name appeared on the accident report Gideon had photographed and sent me. Her name was Ferris. I told her I was the accident victim and that I had questions about the circumstances. I told her my professional background. Although I asked for a meeting when I was mobile, she said she'd been planning to call me. I held that information quietly. The accident report, I said. Were you satisfied with it at the time of filing? I'm not in a position to discuss that at the moment, she said. But I'll see you when you're discharged. I thanked her and ended the call. Day 6. Arabella came one final time. She came in the early morning, before the shift change. Without coffee and without performance, she stood at the foot of my bed with her hands at her sides and looked at me the way you look at someone when you've stopped deciding how to appear. She looked like my sister. She looked like the person I had taught to ride a bike in the parking lot behind our parents' house. Like the person I had called the first time she failed her nursing practical and needed someone to tell her it wasn't the end of the world. I looked back. How much do you know? She asked. Enough? And what are you going to do? The question I had been moving toward since I opened my eyes. What you do not do, you do not forgive quickly and publicly, the kind of forgiveness that requires the person who wounded you to witness it being granted. You do not explain your feelings or invite them to contextualize their choices. You do not provide the emotional encounter that lets them leave feeling anything other than the specific weight of what they chose. I'm going to heal, I said. And then I'm going to make sure everything that was built around my incapacity collapses under the weight of its own documentation. She considered this. That sounds like a threat, she said. It sounds like a description. She stood at the foot of the bed for another moment. She wanted to give me something, an explanation, a context, a version of events in which her choices were comprehensible in a way that might ask for my understanding. I could see the need for it in her, the need to be witnessed, the need to be someone in the story, rather than simply what the story moved through. I waited. I did not help her find the words. She left. I sent a message to Josephine. Ready to file. The weeks that followed were the kind of work I understood. Not dramatic, not satisfying in the way a confrontation is satisfying. The raised voice and the slammed door that give the nervous system something clean and complete. This was different. Oh, this was precision applied to a situation that had been designed to benefit from imprecision, from grief, from the assumption that a woman in a hospital bed with fractured ribs would not have the presence of mind to become her own best advocate before the administrative process had finalized against her. They had underestimated what I did for a living. What I did for a living was exactly this. Josephine, working with the healthcare consent litigation attorney she connected me with, a man named Absalom Rice, whose reputation in the field was formidable and whose manner was entirely without drama, filed a formal complaint with the state bar regarding the conditions under which the September Will Amendment had been executed. 12 minutes, 23 pages, no independent counsel present. Now, she simultaneously filed in civil court to have that document and the deed transfer addendum set aside on grounds of inadequate informed consent. Not fraud, not yet, but the predicate finding that would allow fraud to be argued if the evidence supported it. Alongside this, Osric Thane's committee completed their review and issued a formal finding. The surrogate designation had been procedurally deficient. The finding went into my permanent patient record and into the hospital's internal case review system. A revised intake protocol was in development. And alongside both, a fourth thing was moving. It had begun with a document Margaret found while tracing the provenance of Arabella's continuing education module. Now, the advanced care planning certification completed in October had been a refresher. Arabella had completed the same module once before, 16 months earlier. 16 months earlier, she had been doing a locum placement at a private clinic. A patient there, a wealthy elderly woman, had been the subject of a family dispute about end-of-life care in which the surrogate's conduct had been unusually aggressive and unusually convenient. The patient had died. The dispute had been settled quietly. There had been no formal investigation at the time. I identified this information, verified that it was accurate, and routed it through an anonymous channel to the person at the Professional Regulatory Board who had the authority and the obligation to act on it. This is what I did every day professionally. And I connected the documentary record to the people empowered to read it. I am precise about this distinction. I did not plant evidence. I did not fabricate anything. I found what existed, confirmed it was real, and put it in front of someone whose job was to follow it. 3 weeks after my discharge, I met with Detective Ferris at Josephine's office on a Thursday afternoon. She was lean, direct, with the economy of expression that comes from years of learning that what people don't say is as documentable as what they do. She had brought 2 folders and a laptop, and she had the manner of someone who has already drawn conclusions and is in the process of building the record to support them. "The accident report bothered me from the beginning," she said, "the specific location of the crash. As the ice distribution on that stretch of road, the maintenance crew's report actually shows lighter ice at that particular curve than at 2 other points along the same route." She paused. "The damage pattern on the vehicle was also inconsistent with uncontrolled loss of control impact." Inconsistent how? Consistent with controlled deceleration before the moment of impact. The room was quiet. "We ordered a mechanical inspection," she said. "The brake system shows evidence of an intermittent failure mechanism. Not obvious, not detectable in standard pre-drive inspection, but under specific conditions of stress, it would produce a delayed and unreliable braking response." "Icy roads being the stress condition," I said, "combined with a specific speed range." She looked at me. "You were on a route he suggested." "He drove that route at a speed I registered as slightly below his usual," I said. "I thought at the time it was caution. I noted it anyway because I note most things. I have the notation." She wrote this down. "We're not filing anything yet," she said, "but I want you to understand the scope of what we're looking at." "I understand it," I said. I had understood it for weeks. Understanding it and having the documentation to support it were different things, and I was patient about the difference. Margaret's forensic accounting report came in at month 2. She had worked with the methodical pleasure of someone doing the kind of work they were made for, and what she found confirmed what I had suspected and sharpened it into something precise. In 2 of the 6 documents, the September will amendment and the deed transfer addendum, she had identified conditions of execution that would not survive legal scrutiny. The September appointment, 12 minutes, 23 pages, no independent review, a document type that required careful line-by-line consideration presented as a routine administrative formality. The deed transfer, embedded as a minor administrative correction in the paperwork of a long and complex real estate closing, positioned where attention would be most eluded. These were not aggressive financial planning. These were documents designed to be signed without being understood. I read the report twice and thought about the patience required to construct this. The willingness to wait. The capacity to perform a normal marriage, dinners, conversations, and the domestic texture of a shared life, while simultaneously dismantling the financial protection that made the normal marriage anything other than a long prelude to its ending. The civil settlement came at month 4. Absalom Rice brought it to me on a Wednesday afternoon with the neutrality of a man who wins arguments by letting the record speak. Dorian's counsel, facing the 12-minute documentation and Margaret's forensic accounting report and the full picture assembled over months, had advised settlement. The September will amendment was set aside, the deed transfer addendum was set aside, the survivorship structures they had anchored were unwound, the wellness clinic stake, the brokerage consolidation, the restructured beneficiary designations, all reversed. Stood the condominium addressed through the divorce proceedings running concurrently. "They moved quickly once we had the reception log," Rice said. "The record doesn't leave room for argument," I said. "That's the point of building it correctly." The criminal case moved more slowly, as criminal cases do. The vehicle analysis completed at month 5. The filing came 6 weeks after that. I gave my statement twice, reviewed the engineering report 4 times, answered every question with the precise and documented clarity that 11 years of ethics consultation had made my default mode. Dorian was charged on a Tuesday morning, 7 months after the accident. I was in my office at Asheville when Josephine called. I was reviewing an ethics committee case about a patient whose family was in disagreement about her care, a competent patient with clearly documented wishes, and a family struggling to accept them. Straightforward by my standards. I finished the consultation report and signed it and sent it to the committee. Then I called Josephine back and said what needed to be said and asked to be kept informed of the arraignment schedule. Then I went to my 12 o'clock meeting, which was a department review of the Advanced Care Planning Documentation Protocol at Asheville, a protocol I had been revising for 4 months with the particular attention of someone who knew exactly where these documents could fail and what the failure cost. Arabella's nursing license was suspended pending the regulatory investigation the anonymous tip had initiated. Under the board's preliminary finding noted concerns about a pattern of conduct extending across 2 separate cases that would require full review. I read the finding on a Friday afternoon, at my desk, with a cup of coffee and the courtyard visible through the window behind me. Early spring, and someone had planted crocuses along the south wall. Purple, very small, coming up through the residual frost with the specific determination of things that don't know, the weather is still against them. The conversations with my family had happened over the preceding weeks in careful sequence. I had told my parents what I knew in the order that the evidence established it, watching my mother's face when I explained the survivorship clauses, and my father's when I laid out the timeline of the Proxy designation. After I had watched Gideon read Margaret's forensic accounting summary and then put it down and not pick it up again for a long time. I had not told them what to feel about any of it. That was not my work. My work was the record. The timeline, the architecture of what had actually happened, made visible. Gideon had given me 7 handwritten pages, covering everything he could recall about the night of the accident. The dinner, the conversation, the specific sequence in which names had been raised. His handwriting was careful and slightly cramped, the way it had always been since childhood. He had handed them to me without being asked, which told me something about who my brother was at the core of things. I had held those pages for a long time before adding them to the folder. I returned to full-time work at month 6. And it was stranger than I had expected, and then it wasn't. It was strange to sit in consultation on questions of surrogate authority, knowing what I now knew from the inside. It was strange to review the documentary records of other patients' decisions and write recommendations about who had the right to speak for someone who couldn't speak for themselves. Strange, and then it was just work again. The work I was made for. I revised Asheville's Advanced Directive Documentation Protocol over 4 months, closing every procedural gap I had identified for my own admission. I published 2 papers in the following year. The first was on surrogate decision-making in cases of procedurally deficient proxy designations. It was cited in 3 institutional protocols within 6 months of publication, both including Caldwell Regional's revised intake procedure. The second was on asset restructuring as financial abuse in marital contexts, jointly authored with a forensic accountant listed in the acknowledgments only as MF. Margaret had asked to remain anonymous. I respected that. On a Wednesday morning near the end of that second year, I was finishing the final revision of the second paper when I changed a word in the concluding paragraph. The paragraph recommended that financial institutions adopt protocols for flagging the accelerated transfer of individually held assets into survivorship structures within a marriage, particularly in the 12 to 24 months preceding a life-threatening event involving one of the parties. But I had used the word recommended. I changed it to required. I saved the document and sent it to the journal at 9:14 in the morning. 14 months after an icy road and a suggested route, and a machine that had been set in motion long before the night I found out about it. Then I picked up my coffee and went to my 10 o'clock meeting. That evening, leaving the hospital, I passed through the main lobby and saw a woman sitting in the patient family waiting area. She was in her late 30s, well-dressed in the specific way of someone who has dressed carefully to project calm and is not quite managing it. She was holding a phone she wasn't looking at. Her hands were too still. I stopped. "Are you waiting for news?" I asked. She looked up. My husband is in a procedure. Oh, his family is... They keep telling me they have the authority to make decisions. His sister keeps saying there's paperwork. I don't know what rights I have. She stopped. I don't know if I have any. I sat down beside her. I told her what she needed to know. About healthcare proxies, about capacity assessment, about the difference between what a family member claims and what a hospital is legally required to honor. I told her about the patient advocate's office. I told her the questions to ask, in what order, and the name of a patient rights attorney who could be reached that evening. I stayed for 37 minutes. When I stood to leave, she caught my hand briefly. "Thank you," she said, in the voice people use when they mean something larger than the words. "Document everything," I said. "Every conversation, every name, look, every time of day. Write it down before anyone can change what you remember." I walked out through the hospital's front doors into the evening and did not look back.
What's that, 25? Is that 25? I'm not good at Roman numerals. Is that 25? Made a really good egg sandwich today. Scrambled a couple eggs with some chili crisp oil. Put them on an everything sub roll with cheddar and Kewpie. That sounds so fucking good. Todd? Blessy Jessie. Boy, howdy, welcome in. Thank you for the follow, welcome. What are the chances 2 people who know each other from DJ streams? Wait, really? Sandwiches? It's 25. More people call me XX. Okay. Wow. Cross each other's paths in a random art stream. I love that. Don't keep your eggs in your gumboots. Well, yeah, but you put them in the fridge. Duh. Duh. Oh, well, that's so excellent. What's just happened here in my in my room, in the room that I'm in my world? Bub's just taken a massive dump. Massive dump. Hi, Gio. Gas station back shift. Peak pandemic job. Anybody shopping at 3 a.m. during a global pandemic? I love that, dreamer. You spent the time right. I love telling a customer they can't do something and they reply with, "But I want to." Works every time. 60% of the time it works. Every time. Stumpy. Eggs are cooled in a fridge. Oh, okay. Fun Aussie fact. You have to check them for tarantulas before cracking them. Well, yeah, you got to check them for big, massive, fuck-off huntsmans, or perhaps a redback spider. Corporal Chonk. Corporal Chonk was just here on stream. Actually, it's Corporal Chonk. Corporal Chonk's the one who just laid a Mondo Dookie in the box. Welcome in, Corporal Chonk. Appreciate it. Come on through, Dolly Parton. Cryptid! Hi, my love. How are you? I did work on this off stream. Yeah, I got maybe halfway through